This is 1 liter of petrol, or at least that's what the pump told you. Since 2025, almost every liter of petrol sold in India is actually 1/5 ethanol. Alcohol, distilled from crops, sugarcane, maize, and rice. And here's the thing, nobody printed on the pump. To grow the crops inside that 1 liter, somewhere in India, a farm pumped roughly 1,000 liters of fresh groundwater out of the earth. 1,000 liters of water for 1 liter of fuel. Fill a 40-liter tank and you've quietly drained about 40,000 liters. In a country where 12% of the population already lives without adequate access to safe drinking water. This is the story of E20, a policy sold as a triple win for the economy, for farmers, and for the planet. And it's the story of what the official numbers leave out. Let's follow the data. To be fair to this policy, you have to understand the problem it was built to solve. And it's a real problem. India imports almost 88% of its crude oil. Every year, roughly 240 million tons arrive by tanker. About 5 million barrels every single day. The bill? Between $120 and $144 billion a year. It's one of the largest single drains on India's foreign exchange. And it leaves the economy hostage to every war, sanction and choke point between the Persian Gulf and Mumbai. So the government's logic was simple. India consumes about 54 billion liters of petrol a year. Replace 20% of that with ethanol made from Indian crops, and you keep that money home. And on its own terms, it worked. E20 saves about $4 billion in foreign exchange every year. Since 2014, over 1.4 lakh crore rupees has stayed in India instead of flowing to oil producers. Money that went to distilleries and through them to farmers. $4 billion a year. Real savings. That's the promise, and the promise is true. But a national policy isn't judged only by what it saves. It's judged by what it costs. And who pays? So let's open the other side of the ledger. The first people paying are the ones the policy never asked. Everyone who bought a car or a two-wheeler before 2023. Ethanol isn't just weaker petrol. Chemically, it's a different animal. A solvent that attacks rubber and plastic, and a sponge that pulls moisture straight out of the air. Engines can be built to handle it. With hardened seals, upgraded fuel pumps, smarter engine computers, and from April 2023, every new vehicle sold in India is built exactly that way. But here's the problem. Between 2011 and 2023, India sold over 250 million vehicles. Around 234 million of them were engineered for E5 or E10, never E20. That's 234 million cars, bikes, and scooters. More than the combined population of Britain, France, and Germany. Running every day on a fuel they were never designed to survive. There is no retrofit program, no subsidy, no option at the pump. And the damage isn't theoretical. In surveys covering nearly 50,000 vehicle owners, 55% of pre-2023 owners reported increased wear. Corroded fuel lines, failing pumps, clogged injectors, repairs paid entirely out of pocket. Then there's the penalty you pay, even if nothing breaks. Ethanol carries about 30% less energy per liter than petrol. That's not an opinion, it's physics. Less energy in, fewer kilometers out. The government says the mileage drop is small, 3 to 6%. But in the same surveys, 2/3 of older vehicle owners reported drops above 10%. Nearly a quarter reported up to 20%. And here's the part that makes it a hidden tax. E20 costs exactly the same at the pump as petrol did. Same price, same excise duty, same VAT. You pay for 100 kilometers and your vehicle delivers 85. Nobody legislated this tax. Nobody voted on it. It just quietly appeared inside every full tank in India. Now, a mileage penalty might sound survivable, but you have to see it inside the full life of an Indian vehicle owner. because the same state runs every stage of it. Stage 1, purchase. Buying a car in India means paying some of the highest vehicle taxes on earth. 28% GST plus cess that can push the total to nearly 50% on mid-size cars and SUVs. Add road tax, and in many cases, the government makes more from your car than the company that built it. Stage 2, use. That heavily taxed machine is now degraded daily by a mandated fuel it wasn't built for. Worse mileage, corroding parts. Stage 3, death. In Delhi NCR, a petrol vehicle older than 15 years is banned. Not banned if polluting, banned, full stop. It can pass every emissions test, have barely 30,000 kilometers on the clock. Doesn't matter. It's classified end of life, impounded if found, and crushed. Put the 3 stages together and a pattern appears. The state taxes the asset at purchase, shortens its life through fuel policy, then destroys it by decree. And the middle-class family absorbs the loss every single time. That's wealth destruction, but it's still not the biggest cost on the ledger. The biggest one you can't see at all. Remember that 1,000 liters hiding in every liter of fuel? Here's where it comes from. Ethanol is made from crops, and crops are made from water. The distillery itself uses only 4 or 5 liters per liter of ethanol. That's the number the industry likes to quote. But the crop in the field is a different story. Sugarcane ethanol, about 3,000 liters of water per liter of fuel. Maize ethanol, about 4,700 liters. And rice ethanol, nearly 11,000 liters of water for a single liter of fuel. 11,000 liters. That's enough drinking water to sustain one human being for roughly 10 years. Burned to move a car a few kilometers. Now scale it up. E20 needs about 10.5 billion liters of ethanol every year from a mix of maize, sugarcane, and rice. Multiply it out, and the program's annual water footprint comes to roughly 56 trillion liters. A number that big means nothing on its own. So here's what 56 trillion liters actually equals. It is roughly 24% of all the groundwater India extracts in a year. 1 rupee coin in every 4, pulled from the nation's wells, spent on fuel. It equals India's entire annual domestic drinking water demand. Everything, every tap, every household, every city, all 1.4 billion people matched liter for liter by what goes into E20. And this water isn't coming from places that can spare it. 1/3 of India's monitored wells are already in continuous decline. NITI Aayog itself warns that 21 major cities, Delhi, Bengaluru, Chennai, are approaching day zero, the day the groundwater runs out. Meanwhile, in Marathwada, farmers queue for drinking water, while distilleries in the same districts pump from the same dying aquifers. So let's do the exchange rate the government never published. $4 billion saved, 56 trillion liters of water spent. That works out to about 7 cents, roughly 6 rupees, per 1,000 liters of fresh groundwater. India is trading the one resource that has no import market, no substitute, and no synthetic replacement. At 6 rupees a ton, we're mining water we cannot replace to avoid importing oil we can. But it's worth it for the climate. That's the last line of defense. So let's test it. Ethanol does burn cleaner in the city. Carbon monoxide down 30 to 50%. Real local benefit. But climate impact isn't measured at the tailpipe. It's measured across the fuel's whole life. Fertilizer on the fields, diesel in the transport, and distilleries running in large part on coal. Run the full calculation for a car driven 10,000 kilometers, including the extra fuel burned because of the mileage drop, and E20's total greenhouse saving over pure petrol comes to about 3.3%. If the ethanol came from a coal-fired distillery, 1.8%, not 20%, not even 5%, under 2% in the typical case. E20 doesn't so much cut pollution as relocate it. From city tailpipes to village smokestacks. And there's one more bill. Nearly half of 20's feedstock is now maize. The same maize that feeds India's poultry industry. Fuel distilleries, armed with a guaranteed price of 71 rupees 86 paise a litre, are outbidding the food chain. Maize prices have surged. Eggs and chicken, the cheapest protein for hundreds of millions, are inflating, and India, a maize exporter, is now looking at importing maize. Paid for in the same foreign exchange the program was meant to save. So here's the complete ledger of E20. On one page, $4 billion a year kept home and a real cushion against oil shocks. That page is true. On the other, 234 million vehicles degrading on a fuel they weren't built for. A hidden tax of 10 to 20% on every tank. Family assets taxed at 50% and crushed at year 15. Food protein inflating. A climate benefit under 3%. And 56 trillion litres of irreplaceable groundwater every single year, priced at 6 rupees per 1,000 litres. An import bill is a problem money can fix. An empty aquifer is not. None of this means biofuels are evil or that energy security doesn't matter. It means the maths has to be honest. Guardrails on food crops, unblended petrol available for the 234 million vehicles that need it, water accounting for every distillery. And above all, recognizing that the real destination isn't burning food in engines. It's leaving combustion behind altogether. Because a policy that saves dollars by spending water isn't energy independence. It's a loan taken from the ground beneath us. And every loan comes due.